Welcome back to the program. So, yes, it is very late at night, and the reason I'm getting everything done now is because I was working on my speech for tomorrow night that I'm going to be giving in Arizona and then doing a book signing. So, I'm going to do quick segments tonight, probably 10 minutes each, give or take, okay? Now, President Trump is obviously in China right now, and apparently they have rolled out the red carpet for him. I've heard that the YMCA Trump song was being played for him, and so they're giving him the royal treatment, at least at this point. And so because of that, I thought, well, why don't we do a segment on Xi Jinping, who he is, who his family is, and the very strange thing that has occurred. Why would somebody who was treated so poorly by the Mao Zedong regime in China, and especially his father, which we're going to talk about, why would he also become a pro-Maoist communist? Doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, if you think about it, many of the largest slave owners were former slaves. Many people that sadly were abused as children grow up, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, they end up being abusers as well. So that could be a big part of it. Listen to this interesting story. On the eve of President Trump's meeting in Beijing with Xi Jinping, it is worth reminding ourselves of something not often discussed, and that is the Chinese president's family background. Xi Jinping is so radically different from almost all Americans that it's extremely difficult for most of us to even understand exactly who he is. I first ran into this some years ago when at the beginning of writing columns for the Epoch Times, I was informed by their then publisher, who is now deceased, to quote, go easy on Xi Jinping because their objective was to encourage the Chinese leader to liberalize, as they say. That seemed quite naive, even back then. But I went along with it, assuming that they knew more than I did. Much of their staff came from China. That same publisher was later surprised when I discovered and informed him that Xi Jinping's father, Zedong, who lived from 1913 to 2002, had been a victim of the great proletarian cultural revolution, and Xi himself had been exiled as a teenager. The paper's point of view has since changed, but not because of him. According to multiple sources, Zedong, an early supporter of the revolution and once a vice premier, ran afoul of Mao Zedong in 1962 when he praised a novel, a positive biographical treatment of one of Xi's senior revolutionary mentors who had fallen out of favor in one of their intra-party rivalries. The father was accused of revisionism and being a leader of the Zhejiang anti-party clique in Chinese Communist Party parlance was brutally ostracized. So follow me here. So Xi Jinping's father had a falling out with the communist Mao Zedong Communist Party of China and the Cultural Revolution. It got considerably worse during the Cultural Revolution, according to other sources. Zedong was paraded around in public. These are known as struggle sessions. This is in September of 1967 in Jian province. He was labeled a traitor to the revolution. He was humiliated. He was beaten, he was isolated, he was imprisoned for many, many years, including having to stay in a very tiny room from 1968 to 1975. He was also subjected to forced manual labor and repeated offenses and beatings. His family suffered greatly as well. His wife and his children, including a teenage Xi Jinping, were also beaten, isolated, forced into labor camps, and attacked. Xi Jinping was sent down the countryside for years at a hard labor internment camp. Many American politicians, Donald Trump among them, have been subjected to considerable ridicule, but nothing remotely like this. No one has been marched around in public, humiliated, often with dunce caps on their heads, forced to denounce themselves and their friends and their family and their relatives, stripped of all of their livelihoods, not allowed to practice their occupations, and incarcerated and beaten in prisons for years, if not killed. Mao Zedong instigated all of this. It was his doing. And he was by far the greatest mass murderer in world history, with estimates that reach the amount of victims of the Great Leap Forward from anywhere between 40 to as much as 70 million people massacred. And yet he still lies in state in his mausoleum in Tiananmen Square with crowds lined up to admire his dead corpse. Many rebelled against the man, of course, and still do. But Xi Jinping, despite the horrendous treatment of his family, of his father, and to himself, was not one of them. He did the complete opposite. After Deng Xiaoping took the helm of China after Mao's death in 1976, communist extremism was abandoned in favor of the fascist oligarchy that the country is run under today. Deng, in charge during the Tiananmen Square massacre, reinstated the capitalist's road, as long as it adhered to the most rigid of party loyalty. At that point, Xi Jinping was more or less rehabilitated, but meanwhile his son has been gradually bringing back much of the iron fist of Maoism, much of it through indirect technological means such as Skynet, social credit scores, and the government-run data fusion system known as IJOP, or the Integrated Joint Operations Platform. Other aspects of more direct evil of Xi Jinping overseeing are the oppression of the approximately 12 million Uyghur Muslims. I believe that number should be 1.2. Maybe they're missing a decimal. I didn't think it was 12 million, but that's what it says in what I'm reading here. The Christians of China, as many as 100 million, and the Falun Gong, also a large group, most of whom have already fled the country due to the forced organ transplants, as well as virtually any dissident. Beyond that, Xi Jinping has allied with totalitarian governments around the globe, including, of course, the Iranian mullahs, against the freedom-loving people of that country who have been regularly slaughtered since 1979. All this is under the rubric of socialism with Chinese characteristics. To a great degree, Xi Jinping has become the contemporary mirror of the evil dictator Chairman Mao Zedong, who destroyed his own family. Besides his father being incarcerated for years and beaten, his mother and sisters living in poverty, and him being exiled himself, along with his half-sister, hanged herself during the Cultural Revolution from a shower at a military academy just to get away from the torture and the rapes. Donald Trump did have a sister who criticized him, the federal appellate court judge, Marianne Trump Berry, who died in 2023. But to imply a similarity in the backgrounds of these two leaders is crazy, according to this, not me. I mean, he had 90-something indictments. They tried to kill him multiple times, so he's had his fair share, believe me. Few Westerners, arguably none, have gone through what Xi Jinping has, and of all things, lived to come out on the other side as a longtime dictator of one of two of the most populous nations on earth. What would Sigmund Freud have made of this? Or Shakespeare? Or Sophocles? I can't even pronounce that one. President Trump undoubtedly knows much of this about Xi. How our president uses this knowledge is unclear, but he does have experience dealing with autocrats, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, etc. He has been accused of cozying up to them. Of course, he's really not. But is that really what he is doing? It appears to be a deliberate strategy, more like a negotiating technique to make your opponent or your partner feel comfortable. Well, perhaps that's why he likes to say that I get along with Xi, I like Xi, we're good close friends, whatever he says, so that when that goes out into the international media, Xi Jinping is hearing that President Trump likes him and that he's a good friend of his and he can work with him and this and that. But hopefully President Trump is not gullible, and Xi Jinping, if he thinks that President Trump likes him, well, maybe he'll try to do something to show him that, hey, I don't really like you. And that's what we have to worry about. What good does it do to go to China to call Xi a horrible dictator, accurate as that may be? It's what you do that counts, not what you say in the final analysis anyway. It should be remembered, and no doubt Xi Jinping probably does, that when the Chinese leader came to Mar-a-Lago in 2017, President Trump informed him in the midst of their discussions and entertainments that the U.S. was attacking his then ally in Syria. Will history repeat itself? If it does, it is likely to be far more fraught. We are at a turning point. Everything from the Iran war to modern life, the global economy itself is at play. I don't have to tell anybody to stay tuned, because I'm sure you will. Now, that was a Substack by Roger Simon, who's been around a long time, interesting writer. And so I saw that and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So let's recap this. So you have Xi Jinping, who is a communist dictator who doesn't believe in freedom of rights. He doesn't believe in freedom of religion. He doesn't believe in any other parties but his party. He kills people indiscriminately. He locks people down, forces them into, hard labor and slave labor, the Uyghur Muslims, and so on and so forth. He attacks Americans constantly. He helped release this virus to kill Americans and people around the world. So why is it that as a teenager, he was beaten, he was incarcerated, he was forced into hard labor, his father was beaten, imprisoned, his sister, his half-sister, was raped and beaten and eventually killed herself? Why then would he turn around and say, I don't want to be anything like Mao Zedong. I don't want to torture people. They did this to me. They did this to my father, my sister, my mother. Why then would he turn around and say, well, Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward tortured me and my family, so therefore I'm going to torture people too? I don't know. I can't make that call. It's a psychological issue. And sometimes, like I said, the biggest slave owners out there were former slaves themselves. Why would they enslave people if they were enslaved? Why do people that beat their kids then raise their kids, and those kids, not always, but sometimes, end up having kids of their own and they beat them? The only thing I can say is, some of it's learned behavior. It's what you were brought up in. It's what your environment was. Violence begets violence. And at some point, someone has to be strong enough to break that and not continue on with that. On a personal note, I had a great father. Loved him dearly. Miss him, to be quite honest, a lot. Died in 2019. Funny as hell. Funny man. But he didn't have a father. His father took off on him, left him with his sister and my grandmother, and he had to fend for the family. He had to grow up quick, okay? Real quick. But when he was there, he wasn't a great father. He was an alcoholic. He beat the kids sometimes, not as bad as, locking them in broom closets and stuff like that. But he was there. He wasn't there. He was neglectful. And eventually, he took off. He just left the family. Now, my father He could have done the same thing. He could have said, well, I've never had love. I didn't get any love. So therefore, I'm not going to give love to my kids. But my father didn't do that. My father did love us, was there for us, cherished us, raised us. And in his mind, he said, if my father wasn't there for me, I'm damn sure going to be there for my kids. So again, it's who the individual is. My father didn't beat me, lock me in a broom closet, me and my brother and my sister. No, he was there for us. So he cracked the code. He broke the chain of abuse, if you will. But apparently, with Xi Jinping, that didn't happen. Why? Don't know, but I'd love to hear your comments on it. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. See you in the next one.